Well, let's get a sense of what's going on and how the international press are covering stories worldwide today, social media, online too. Joe Biden, the boy from Scranton who's making play of his working class roots, father, a used car salesman, saying that, well, he's with the Detroit strikers, the first sitting president to join a picket line. And our press reviewer, Erin Okungeye, is here for a closer look. What's going on?
Yes, Joe Biden has repeatedly described himself as the most pro-union president in history. And so on Tuesday, he finally attempted to prove that. The U.S. president, again, joining those striking auto workers in Michigan in what historians quoted in the New York Times today say illustrates Democrats returning to their roots of essentially fighting for workers' rights. Even though presidents are typically expected to remain neutral between striking workers and the companies that they work for, Joe Biden has chosen to really stand firmly with United Auto Workers in order to do that, to return to those kind of left-wing roots. But there are also political calculations to this. The Wall Street Journal pointing out that Biden's visit comes as he's struggling in the polls, largely over both his age and the economy. Donald Trump then, of course, looking to step in and take advantage of that. And with that in mind, he is planning to address striking auto workers in Michigan today. The former president has already blamed Joe Biden and the Democrats more generally for the workers' problems, and that's because he says of their push to promote electrical vehicles. Now, all of this is all the more important for Trump, as the Wall Street Journal points out, because in 2016, he actually obtained a level of support from union members that no Republican had reached since the times of Ronald Reagan. That helped him, of course, win very critical states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin as well. Now, to finish, and with this in mind, in The Guardian, the former U.S. Labor Secretary writes that Joe Biden really needs to do more than just show up at the picket line if he wants to maintain and solidify that blue-collar kind of working-class support. The column argues that in order to do this, he needs to openly criticize CEOs and big corporations that are raking in astronomical profits compared to what their average employees are making. Joe Biden needs to work on busting monopolies and on condemning firms that use their profits to buy back stocks, to pollute the planet, and, quote, to pollute our democracy with big money.
Now, really interesting, and a universal issue is bullying in schools. The French government's going to take on the bullies. They've got a new plan coming out.
That's right, Gavin. This topic has been dominating headlines here in France, really, for well over a week, and that comes after a series of really tragic suicides amongst school children, high school children as well, the most recent being the suicide of a 15-year-old who had been bullied at school. That happened earlier this month in September. Now, it made the front page of Libération this morning, which suggests on its headline that this plan that's expected today will include efforts to manage bullies themselves at school, involvement from families, and a component on the role of the justice system in this phenomenon. The paper says that the urgency of the problem requires, of course, a multifaceted approach, specifically, for example, including giving teachers the tools to identify and respond to the risks, and also to better involve parents by improving the relationship that they have to educational institutions. Now, the independent media outlet Mediapart today has a different focus. They argue that any effective plan should include both punitive and rehabilitative measures for the bullies themselves, that kicking bullies out of school or taking them to court is, of course, perhaps a necessary thing to do, a necessary response to bullying, but it's not enough. The paper says, cites experts that say bullies need to also be given access to psychological assistance, to be accompanied as well, especially given that bullies are often former or future victims as well.
And much of the world's press covering the same story on its front pages, the growing refugee crisis in Armenia.
Yeah, that's right. It was on the front page of Le Monde, really the front page of numerous papers from France to Belgium and Switzerland today. Now, Le Monde says that Azerbaijan's offensive on Nagorno-Karabakh has forced some 13,000 ethnic Armenians, residents of the our enclave, to flee to Armenia. This, of course, after Azerbaijan officially took control of the territory for the first time in 30 years. The paper says that fears of ethnic cleansing now are higher than ever, and that's something that many actually blame Russian peacekeepers for. That's because they've been in Armenia since the 2020 ceasefire, but they did nothing to prevent Baku's latest offensive. Now, that's something that the international relations magazine Foreign Affairs also focuses on in a piece published yesterday. It blames both failed Western diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis, and also Moscow for essentially brokering a deal that forced the local population to disarm itself, its defense forces, and to begin talks on the full reintegration into Azerbaijan, which obviously emboldened Baku. That position, the magazine says, of course, furthers the Kremlin's own agenda of keeping its own peacekeepers on the ground and thereby pushing Western mediators essentially to the margins. And then finally, to finish on this, The Guardian, for its part, focuses on how Western countries are now going to be forced to rethink their relationship with Azerbaijan. Baku has long sought to shape itself as an indispensable regional ally, especially for European countries, but that's starting to change. Some officials finally considering sanctions against Azerbaijan and saying that there really should be serious consequences if there are attempts to remove Karabakh Armenians from their homes or any other major human rights abuses.
Now, to end on, you're going to end with a little bit of hope for all of us on how to slow human aging.
Yeah, it's what we all hope, I think, Gavin. Entitled "In Search of Forever," the British magazine The Economist has an upcoming special with 8 different articles on how slowing, if not altogether reversing, the aging process is increasingly the topic of research and investment. And it's not just a thing for billionaires. I just took a look at the first article in the series. A lot of this research is promising. Some drugs on extending the lifespan already seem to be working, at least in mice. Now, innovations in gene editing is helping the process along, and there are other major changes that are really promising. That includes the ability to produce personalized stem cells, which kind of keep you young, diagnostic tools allowing scientists to calculate the biological ages of bodies and organs. But I think the most exciting part is knowledge about how the physiological details of aging is increasing, and that's actually allowing scientists and doctors to target individual aspects of the aging process, for example, like chronic inflammation, and kind of rectify them or reverse them.
Erin, thank you. Erin Ogunkaye with our press review.